Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is Stop Selling, Start Influencing. Tom Augenthaler's Logistics Marketing Game Plan. How's it going, Tom?
Good, man. How's it going with you, Joe?
Doing great. It's been a while since you've been on my podcast, so please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Sure. My name is Tom Augenthaler, and my company is 551 Media, and I am based in Houston, Texas.
Very nice. So what does 551 Media do?
We specialize in influencer marketing for B2B companies. So we look to work with generally B2B SaaS companies, software as a service, that are startups to a little mature, say mid-market. They've received the venture B round of financing typically. And what that means is that they are now got the adequate funding to hire the right people, to put them in the right places in terms of their jobs, in terms of their marketing. So they're rapidly maturing. And that means they've already done some PR. They've probably got a basic analyst relations program going. They certainly have a marketing teams, at least a skeleton team in place. So they're doing some things there. And that way we can kind of come in and help them build an influencer program that cooperates and really enhances the other marketing that they're already doing. And I find that generally that's the way that it works best. You can do influencer marketing on its own and kind of use that as a standalone pillar. But I find that for B2B companies, it's best as a complement to the other marketing and PR that you're already doing.
So what is influencer marketing? I know I have some idea because I've talked to you about it a few times, but for those who are not involved, what is that?
So when the word influencer itself is a loaded word, and what I mean by that is that the media has kind of talked about it so much to a point where most people immediately think influencer, somebody on Instagram, somebody on TikTok, somebody who talks about things like travel, fashion, beauty, weight loss, whatever, right? It's more of these sort of general topics that people are interested in. And they're filming themselves all the time. They're taking pictures of themselves all the time. And that's generally what people regard as an influencer these days. The people I work with who are influencers in the B2B space are quite a bit different. So there are people like you, Joe, who have a podcast. They are people that have deep industry expertise because they've worked in the industry. They haven't just published a book about it. They are people who probably consult a little bit on the side. Maybe they're independent analysts. Some of them are pure content creators, but most of them dabble in these other things as well. So the content is sort of just part of what they do as part of their business, to get the word out about themselves.
Tom, I think about when you hear influencer, it's if someone ever says to me, like you said it to me years ago when we first met, you go, "Oh, you're an influencer in the logistics space." It's kind of cringy to hear because what I'm thinking of is the young, attractive woman who's on Instagram and she's selling, some tea to lose weight or, or this wonderful life she has, and impossibly good looking people doing I'll call that the to consumer marketing, and the B2B, you get this.
Right. Here we are.
Not necessarily impossibly good looking, certainly not young, but we have hopefully some credibility in a space, some knowledge in a space that you're hoping the brand can collaborate with.
Exactly. So B2B influencers are people that have, like I said before, built credibility. They have authority because of their track record in the space in which they operate. Whether that be logistics, cloud computing, procurement, supply chain, whatever it happens to be, B2B influencers are people that are, that have built their reputation over time in the industry. So they're more thought leaders in a way, because they have definite opinions about the industry, where it's going, what it's been through, and where, what you should be looking at if you're going to, continue to build your business there.
Tom, I think about this in the logistics space and supply chain. Again, I'll just glom on logistics, transportation, warehousing, supply chain, and all the associated tech. There's a lot of people who've started companies, maybe even exited those companies, had great success, started another company, maybe investing. They're very much influencers in the space, and they're be on a lot of different podcasts. They don't necessarily have their own podcast. Some of them do, some of them don't. There's a lot of people who are not necessarily content creators first, who are influencers in the space. And maybe they're a little too busy to help other people with the marketing, influencer marketing campaigns. But then there's a whole bunch of people who started podcasts, YouTube, maybe they're writing. It's been an explosion of that. I started this podcast 7 years ago, and I think I know a good chunk of the podcasters. I talk to them. A lot of them are on my podcast. I've been on theirs. And this whole space just grew up. Well, I don't even think it's fully matured, because nobody knows exactly how it's supposed to work, but we know it works. I went to a venture capital party before Manifest, not this February, but February before. And I think I'd interviewed 7 companies from that portfolio of that VC. And I spoke to all the founders who I'd interviewed, who were all there. And they all said, "Oh, Joe, every time I interview someone, they listen to that podcast before they come in. Everybody says, oh, I listened to the Joe Lynch podcast before I came in." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." And hopefully also got some business from it. I know I've had some success stories, but it's very interesting to hear that, because I keep thinking, in the olden days when you used to go to a job interview, you don't know the guy. I don't know Tom Augenthaler from from George Washington. I can listen to a podcast, get to know him, and then after 50 minutes of listening, I can go in and interview. And I thought, oh, yeah, this has changed. The world's changed.
It's changed considerably. There was a fellow I follow named Tom Feremsky. He used to be a Financial Times reporter, 15 years ago or so, or even more than that. But he has a online publication called Silicon Valley Reporter. And he made a comment about 10 years ago or so that I was curious about. And the comment was, every company is now a media company. If they want to survive and grow, they are now a media company. So that has very much come about. And he was very prescient with that comment back when he made it, because it's now the case.
It's funny, when I was still in automotive, there's always paperwork. We used to call it paperwork. Now it's all digital. But I remember somebody said, someday they'll dig this so archaeologists will dig this company up and say, this paper company has really cool cars. And now I kind of think the same way. And I think my friend Adam Robinson over at Robinson Agencies Marketer said he built a huge following, email list, tons of website visitors, wrote a ton of content for a logistics company before he started his own a marketing firm. And I remember he used to say, we're a media company that's really good at logistics. And by the way, when I say a lot, I think he got 100,000 people a month to hit a website.
Wow.
Just unbelievably good at it. So anyway, Tom, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started 551 Media, and why you started 551 Media.
I grew up on Long Island, New York, in a town called Port Washington, which is on the shore there. And so I didn't realize how great of a childhood I had until I became an adult. But it was pretty great. We did a lot of sailing and fishing, and we were always outside, doing stuff, and it was great.
You didn't game much?
Uh, there was no gaming back then. Any gaming was like board gaming, dice and things like that. So it was that kind of stuff. I always enjoyed those things, but that was an indoor rainy day type of activity. Otherwise, if it was nice out, man, you were outside. But so I grew up on Long Island. I worked in New York City for a brief period of time, about 4 or 5 years, as a stockbroker, and then I left that, went to graduate school in Boston, Harvard, and once I finished that degree, I moved out to Chicago and I got into the PR business, and that was a fun ride because Chicago at the time was a real hub for PR. It was right there with LA and New York, right? So it was right there smack dab in the middle. And I worked with a number of global PR firms and moved to Houston finally, got married to my wife. And then while here, I ended up doing a lot of work with HP, the technology company. And I eventually became, a full-time employee there, did all that. And when I left HP, I joined a small consultancy that focused on influencer marketing because I had started the influencer stuff while I was at HP, and that's 2007, 2008, 2009, around there. And we had that whole banking crisis and everything kind of threw the media industry into a tizzy because it caused a lot of publications to close doors. So we had to find a way to get the word out about the product set still. And I started experimenting with bloggers, and that's how I got involved in the influencer marketing part. But I was with the agency for about 6 years or so, and then it went out of business because something happened with the finances, and I wasn't involved with any of that. But things happen, so I was kind of thrust out on my own, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? I guess I could go work for another company, but I really didn't want to do that. So I just kind of got scrappy and started my own company and built a business just on the knowledge capital that I'd already acquired by doing what I had done in the past. And at first I did a bunch of consumer work, but I quickly tired of it and just stuck to the B2B stuff because I find that the B2B work is more measured. You could really kind of get to know your clients. It's not transactional. It's much more about building relationships with your client as well as with influencers. And that's something that I enjoy doing.
Yes. When you think about, let's just say, I'll use a logistics example. If I'm going to select a new transportation management system, that is going to be a big purchase. It's going to be even more than the expense of it, the idea that I'm connected to your technology and I need to have that trust. Very different than I'm going to the store and I'm going to buy the latest brand that makes sense for hot chocolate. It's just so an Olympic athlete said, buy this hot chocolate. You go, oh, okay, there's an Olympic athlete on the picture on the hot chocolate, so I'm going to buy it. There's not very much significance whether, if I say, oh, this hot chocolate sucks, I throw it out, who cares? I can't do that with the transportation management system. I have to be able to trust them. And when you say more measured, it has to be more measured. It can't be transactional. It can't be jumping in and making a decision that could ruin my business on a whim.
Right. So it's got to be a considered purchase. So how is that system going to work with the rest of your tech stack? Right? Is it going to be disruptive or is it going to be harmonious? And how difficult is it going to be to get it, integrated? How much time, so you're going to need to really trust this vendor that you're purchasing from to help you integrate it into your system so that it's more orderly, it's smooth, it flows well, and then it achieves what it's supposed to do, is to help your business smooth out some of these rough edges and make things easier, whether it's transactions, whatever else it is.
Yeah, and since I mentioned transportation management system, I'll continue down that same vein. Um, Transportation management systems haven't been around forever. They've started, I'm guessing, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. I know there was some earlier than that, but um, the people who'd most likely buy them first were the ones who had the most freight. So you had companies that would say, okay, you could be a Fortune 500 company and you bought this and you did millions and millions of transactions, shipping transactions every year for 25 years. Now you have to go out and buy. You think you might need to upgrade. Maybe your company got bought, or maybe the transportation management system company got bought, or you think there's some alternatives. The changeover is enormous, right? And no one on your team has ever bought a transportation management system. So that begins the research. And I know people are increasingly looking to Gartner and Forrester, and there's a number of consulting companies, JVF Consulting, I had Metaphora on recently. They're going and saying, hey, we can ask industry experts to help us. We can look at the research, but you have to make a decision that is not easy. And again, the changeover is enormous. So how does influencer marketing fit into, say, that decision making?
Well, you hit upon a couple of key words there: inform, educate. So how are you going to get the word out about your product if you're that vendor that's selling that system? So one of the ways to do it is through influencers. You could have your own internal people that are getting the word out by putting out content, right, which we should be doing, and not just through press releases and a company blog, which is sort of nondescript, standard, doesn't really have a human voice to it.
I sometimes call that oatmeal, because sometimes it takes on an oatmeal consistency, so it doesn't offend anyone, and it kind of agrees with everything. It doesn't upset anybody. It's not what you crave. Oatmeal is never what you crave.
And most people enhance their oatmeal with sugar or milk or whatever they're putting on it, so it has some flavor to it, right? So if you work with the individuals inside the company, your thought leaders putting your content out, or even better, in addition to that, you're working with third-party influencers like you to get on a podcast like this and talk about all of these issues, right? So this kind of content is terrific, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that it's portable. And what I mean by that is when I'm driving around doing my errands, I don't listen to the radio anymore. And I rarely listen to music because, to me, I want to make the most of my time. So what I'll do is I will listen to podcasts on topics that I want to keep up to date on, stay abreast of. So I'll be listening to a podcast as I'm running my errands, right? Getting in and out of the car and everything else. So that's what I mean by the content is portable. So you can listen to it. I don't have to watch it necessarily. Sometimes you want to watch it. In the evenings, I'll watch some YouTube channels or something.
Oh, we both watch a lot of YouTube. I watch YouTube more than anything else.
Yeah. And so that's what I mean by portable. You could bring it with you as you're doing stuff. You're outside doing some yard work, just raking leaves or something. You can pull out a mobile speaker. This is stuff I do. I'll put on the podcast and I'm just listening to a podcast as I'm cleaning up the yard or something, So, and I think a lot of people do that kind of thing. They go on a walk, they listen to things, right? And that's what I mean. So it's not, you don't have to read it. It's not a white paper or something. It's not some ebook or something. And there's nothing wrong with those pieces of content, mind you, because some people like to sit down and just read something. But the portable content like this is terrific because it informs, it educates, and this additional bonus, which is really, really great and powerful, is that you can start to build a connection with the person who's being interviewed or the influencer as well. So you kind of like, I trust Joe. I listen to his podcast. I really like the content. I like the guests he's got on there. And, I really like that guy, that gal Jane, who was talking about that, transportation product, or whatever. And I, maybe I'll look into that, I'll look into her company a little bit and I'll see, and then, so that's how it starts. So the buyers are much more aware of educating themselves now more than ever. So they don't rely on trade shows anymore. They're not relying on all conferences.
That's the dark funnel you've told me about in the past. We did a podcast. I'll put a link to it. Use the term dark funnel. So talk about that dark funnel for just a sec.
Sure. So the dark funnel is, I know it's kind of a mysterious term or whatever, but really it's just content that marketing attribution software doesn't track, can't track, right? So every single person I know has friends, acquaintances, business associates on chats, right? They've got chat groups, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's just on your mobile phone or whatever. There are Slack groups. There are other private groups, right, that are set up through other third-party vendors out there, communities, as they call themselves. There's communities on LinkedIn too, where people are sharing content, sharing ideas. This is all part of the dark funnel. Podcasts are part of the dark funnel because marketing attribution software can't track it.
A lot of people say to me, sponsors, whatnot, I have this conversation once a week. Who actually listens to your podcast? And when I say, well, it's probably 60% logistics providers. That's the nature of all logistics media. And they're like, yeah, but who specifically? You can't tell a lot of on the podcast. I know who follows me from LinkedIn. I can tell from my website. Very difficult to tell from the podcast, but thousands of people listen. And one thing I will say about that is the dark funnel. I joke about it is we as marketers want everybody to get on the expressway to a sale. Download my white paper. Let me have your name. Let me ping you every once in a while. Let me make a phone call to you every once in a while. But you're on the super highway towards the sale. Meanwhile, somebody in the dark funnel, they're on the dirt road running parallel to that highway, and they don't want you to know them. Why? Because they don't want to be pinged. They don't want to be asked. They're still looking. So they're still checking out podcasts, reading stuff online, connecting with people on LinkedIn, maybe going to a conference. They're still looking because they know in a year or two, we want to reconsider our transportation management system or maybe our new transportation provider. And so I think we all do it. How many times have you looked and said, I don't think I'm going to download that white paper because I don't want to be on their list?
I don't want to get hit up every day about something or other, right?
And I'm not against any. And by the way, it's the same with webinars. I think we all have done it, but I think marketers and salespeople are getting a little smarter and realizing the market is educating itself, and it takes its own time. You don't get to decide when they buy.
No, you don't. And it's not an express highway, like you said, Joe. Right, from point A to point B, it's not like that at all. It's
we want it to be.
We'd love it to be, right? And we call it a funnel, right? So there's the funnel, and they're more moving down the funnel. Well, it's more like they're ping-ponging around, and then finally, or like the roulette wheel, right? If they first drop the ball into the roulette wheel, and the wheel is spinning and the ball's bouncing all around before it starts to sort of circle and. It's more like that, right? So you want to just increase the chances that you're either red or black, right? And that the ball's gonna land on your color. So it's more like that. That's a better analogy of it because I just watch my own behavior. It's like, I might hear something on social media, something I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting, I'll check it out, but I don't want to start getting hounded with emails and everything. I just want to look at their stuff and maybe I'll listen to what their founder says on this podcast and I'll get a better idea about the company and what it does. And because if you go to the website, now it's like they want to start channeling into this buy mode, and I'm not ready for the buy mode yet. I'm ready.
They need you on the highway, Tom.
Yeah, I'm in the exploration mode. I'm not in the buy mode yet.
I think this is the challenge we all want as marketers and salespeople. We want this to have the efficiency of a factory. That we're going to put you on the first step, and you're going to move through this process. And I had a boss. He was a vice president of a big automotive company in engineering. And I remember he used to say, I want this sales process. So he bought a company. And I said to him, I said, this is a factory that you only get to manage a few of the aspects. The rest are up to our customers. And that's the challenge. I'm going to throw something else out there, Tom. I started blogging under the name Logistics of Logistics a long time ago. So I met my friend Adam Robinson at Robinson Agency, and we became friends just because we were blogging together. He would write an article, I'd write an article, and I started this podcast 7 years ago. And I got to tell you, the difference between writing an article and the podcast. First off, I was writing the articles usually by myself, which solitary. I don't feel like people ever get to know, like, and trust you very much from articles. You try and get your personality to come through, but people are scanning articles. They're on their phone and they're looking. If there's no headers, there's a good chance I'm not reading your article if there's not headers.
Yeah.
If I can't make it really easy. So what I feel is different when I have someone like you on my podcast. People can get to know, like, and trust you, relate to you on some level, because they can see you, because we create video. They can see you and they can hear you. But also, my job as the host of the podcast is my goal is to say, Tom is an expert. There's no discussion about that. You are an expert in influencer marketing for B2B companies. I want you to be able to hit on all the things that you're expert at. And so I always think that that's a different feeling than reading an article. You can create a white paper. And I've said to people before, they go, I have this white paper. And I said, let's just take the key points and talk about them on the podcast. It's more accessible. And I like to read. I read books, physical books for a long time. And I switched to Kindle. Now I listen to audiobooks. My daughter, who listens to audiobooks, also sent me an article that says, we have been listening to people tell stories since the beginning of time, and we do better. Most people do better listening to stories than reading. I guess if you do either one, it doesn't matter. But I feel like there's something that really works about the new mediums that we're using, which is audio and video.
I think so too. Your daughter's right. Every ancient culture transmitted its ideas and thoughts and things through stories, right? The Iliad, the Odyssey, both of those were orally recited, in the past before they got.
And I was supposed to read those at one time.
The Odyssey, by the way, is easier to read than the Iliad. But
I'm sure I read the Cliff Notes if necessary.
Got the high points, right? The headings. So yeah, but that's the way people like to get their information. Again, there's nothing wrong with a white paper, webinar, things like that. I think they're useful tools and they will remain useful. I think there's a generational aspect to this too. I think older people tend to skew towards more the white papers and the more traditional forms of marketing because that's what they're used to. But the younger generations are much more attuned to video, audio, everything is on the move fast. It's clips.
Oh yeah. It's so much of TikTok's success is on the sales they're making in the back end. And I don't go on TikTok. I'm afraid how much time I might waste. I already watch too much YouTube and Instagram Reels. I'm afraid what might happen to me if I get onto TikTok. But brands are having tremendous success with it. And a lot of times because they find an influencer in that space. And again, that influencer has to fit your brand. It can't be, oh, we found this attractive young person to speak to it, but they don't know anything about it, but they'll catch your attention. You might get the awareness, but you're not going to get the trust that you want to build up with that relationship.
Yeah, it has that ability to build that. And that's what's, as you said, is so difficult through the written word, is much more possible through audio and visual, because we are that kind of creature that likes to look at people when we're talking to them, right? I mean, that's the nature of a party, right? I mean, or a dinner party or something like that. That's why we sit down and have meals together, right? Because it's a way of getting to know each other.
So, Tom, last time, I don't know if it was last time or the time before I talked to you about this, but there's a company called Coupa, and you had shared a story about Coupa. Could you tell that again? I really like it. And by the way, I recommend you go to their website. I know they're I've seen them at conferences, so they're in our space, and it's COUPA. So tell how they've used influencer marketing to become pretty successful.
Yeah, Coupa is a company that I think from the very beginning started with this mindset. And the mindset was that they were going to make their customers the hero. So what they do is they highlight those customers. And if you go to a Coupa event, they'll have some third-party influencers there as well. They certainly do. But the customers are really the ones that are evangelizing and talking about Coupa more than anything else. And customers relate to customers, right? So if you're a potential customer of Coupa, that is a very powerful strategy because you can go through and you can look at the videos and you can watch the interviews and listen to them. And you could say, gee, that situation that person is describing is something that we're experiencing in our business. This is how Coupa helped them. Maybe we should be looking at Coupa. So
Yeah, they're almost like testimonials, and I think some sort of procurement software. So it talks about all the procurement problems. These people kind of tell their story, what was going on. Then I got with Coupa. They helped me get to these results, and it is. I think it's like a testimonial, but it is just very powerful. I've looked at I don't know, I haven't looked at their website in maybe 6 months, but it was impressive what they did.
And I was working for a competitor at that point in time. So I was keenly watching them to see what they were doing. And to their credit, they really made it look effortless. And, like if you looked at visuals of their videos of their events or something, they'd have these big banners, Joe, of, here's Jane at XYZ company, and she's they're a customer of ours, and all the banners were of their customers. I mean, it was like the whole show was about the customer, and Coupa was just sort of there putting on the show in the background. It was really brilliant. We were very successful too in our approach. Our approach was different because we did not have the what would you call it, the latitude to work with the customers to the same extent that Coupa did with theirs. But we reached out to third-party influencers like you, and we would get our thought leaders onto their podcasts or get articles written about us, our research, whatever we were doing. So we were very successful in our own way with our approach. But I would say that the best approach is a blend of those two things. So you work with third-party influencers on one hand, and then your customers and their testimonials on the other. And you really have got a winning formula there.
Yep. I told you before we hit the record button today about lead coverage. It's a marketing business that specializes in logistics, transportation, warehousing, and all the tech. And Kara Smith Brown's one of the co-founders, and I met her at Transportation Sales and Marketing Association. She was with one of her customers giving a presentation. I think the company was ITS, which is a very big company, but wasn't particularly well known. And she was explaining what they did for ITS. So this is kind of, in my mind, kind of the master class in it. Lead coverage helped them develop a metric, and I think it's called the Port Rail Index. And so you see it sometimes referenced. I might have missed on the name of it, but ITS was there saying, yes, we did this with lead coverage. It was very much a joint presentation, which I think is always impressive because they obviously got results or they're not going to come up and talk about it. But I introduced myself to Kara. I've interviewed her since then. I've interviewed her twice since then. She wrote a book, and it was really about how they do things at lead coverage, but it also intertwined her experience as a young woman coming up in a predominantly male business and the success she had, and some of the failures she had, which I think is interesting. She talked about where she failed and talked about how she regained momentum. Anyway, I'm friends with her, and I see her on LinkedIn. She has very good posts on LinkedIn. She's always at conferences. She's always in podcasts. And now she's written this book, and now she's going on a tour to go sign these books. And I'm sure every city she goes to, she's going to meet with potential customers. So she's done a wonderful job. And by the way, none of it feels inauthentic to me. She's very much an influence in this space. I would say, especially with marketing people, especially with, I think, women who would relate to her story. And I think this is just, to me, it's almost like the master class in how to create authentic influencer marketing. It's none of it feels fake, because it's not. It's her story. And I think she's also hasn't buffed it up so it's so perfect that you go, oh my God, Kara's never made a mistake. No, she'd say, yeah, made a mistake, fixed it, made a mistake, fixed it. That's how I build a big company here.
Yeah, that's a smart strategy she's pursuing. And I have to look her up.
I'll introduce you.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I would like to get connected with her on LinkedIn. I'm sure she does a lot of work there, right? But that's a great strategy. Just going around with the book and meeting with potential customers and saying, "Hey, this."
By the way, she also sent the book out. I got a copy of the book, and then of course I listened to audio. So I thumbed through the book and I listened to it.
Oh, good for you! Yeah, you did both.
Yeah, I've interviewed her, so I can listen to those too. But anyway, pick a transportation management system and give us a kind of a case study, maybe, for what this would look like for influencer marketing, just the high points.
We got to always back it up, and we got to say, okay, where do we play in the space? If we're the company, XYZ company, where do we play in the space? Are we rail? Are we trucking? What are we? What's our sweet spot? Right?
What about U.S. domestic mostly, but we have freight forwarding, we have some rail, and we're always adapting. So
okay, so we want to look at where we're at in the space.
I was in TMS out there.
We want to look at where we're at in the space. What are we doing in terms of our marketing now? Right? What's our PR marketing look like? Who are our main customers? What are our, to use an old PR term, I kind of put together a SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunities. Right? I mean, so I'd look and threats. Yeah, I'd look at all of that and kind of put together, okay, well, where are we at? And then put together a plan. Well, how can we better be out there to inform and educate our potential buyers, right? And get them to start thinking about us versus competitors. I'd also look at what competitors were doing, because sometimes competitors have really good ideas and they execute well on some things. So I would look to that, and I would look to see what they were doing well and then imitate it and bring it into my own plan. But overall, I'd look to find influential voices in the industry in which I could start getting in front of and co-creating content with. So whether it's a podcast like yours, whether it's a video caster, whether it's an influencer on a place like LinkedIn, where I could, maybe do a LinkedIn Live with them, or I could get, maybe they could draft an article for me, a LinkedIn article in particular. LinkedIn articles these days are doing very well in terms of organic search. For whatever reason, the search engines are finally recognizing that LinkedIn articles are authoritative, and especially if they're coming out of your executives, from your executives. And I'm not talking about generic articles from the company. I'm talking about Joe Lynch publishes an article on LinkedIn, and Joe just happens to be the CEO of XYZ company, right?
Right. And I always say there's a little difference between, if the CEO, you want a point of view, you want an opinion. I don't want oatmeal. So somebody called it one time to me. They said, I like your articles because it's not popcorn. We can create with AI tons of content. And but it needs a point of view. It needs it. If I'm buying a transportation management system, I want somebody to have a point of view that says, hey, look, you don't want this. You don't want this. You need this, 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 and this. I've lived it. This is my, emphatic advice to you. Do it this way. That means more than a whole bunch of generica.
Yeah. So what is your point of view as the company, right? Like you said, I don't want oatmeal. I can get that anywhere, right? And people today, from the AI perspective, are generating more oatmeal than ever. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can use AI as a very valuable tool if you feed it the information that it needs about your company. So you can upload white papers to it. You can upload documents. You can upload PowerPoint decks. And you can say, analyze these, learn and understand what our positioning is in the industry. Now, I want you to generate a draft article based on these 3 points from a research report we just produced and put it out, and then use the voice of the CEO, right? So you do that, you'll get a really good draft. Now what you need to do is you need to go and edit it, right? So that's the human quotient that can't be replaced. But I have seen,
And don't take all the sharp edges off. This is what I always say is that's where you lose a point of view and it becomes
leave
generic.
some barbed comments in there. Say, because every CEO is usually very opinionated, or
Oh, yeah.
or CMO or CRO or CPO or whatever it is, whatever person in the C-suite, CIO, they're all opinionated. And nobody is sitting there like spouting out oatmeal at the board meetings because they'd be out in 2 seconds, right? So they have to have definite ideas. You want some of those definite ideas coming through in the content, whether they're being interviewed on a podcast, whether they're publishing an article on LinkedIn or whatever. You need your people to be out there giving real opinions about things, about where things are, where things are going. And they don't have to be necessarily 100% accurate, right? Nobody's going to go back and say, oh my gosh, Joe was wrong about this 5 years ago and it went in this direction instead of that direction. Well, congratulations, Joe. Joe's human. We're all human.
Well, that is sometimes so I talk to a lot of marketing people and they'll have the founder or their CEO on, and sometimes they'll say, this marketing team will say, we want to make this point, this point, this point. And I always say, yeah, of course, whatever, but I want to make sure that I'm talking to the founder and they're going to have their own opinion on this. And so I always say the best marketers kind of realize that the founder, the CEO, the senior management usually very passionate about a few things that they want to make those points. And we have to make sure that we make those points because that you lose the point of view that you want to have. And I think this is where influencer marketing is rich and valuable. And it's not the marketing that comes wrong way to say it. I don't ever want to make it sound like the marketing people in developed influencer marketing. So I don't want to ever make it sound like marketing is against it. It's just, it is sometimes uncomfortable when you go, I've got somebody who's going to speak senior management. And then I have another guy like a Joe Lynch. Please don't do anything stupid that hurts the brand.
Right. So I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was at HP and I was first working with bloggers, right, my first reaction was probably what most marketers would think or business people would think. It's like, well, who the heck are these people? Because if I'm working with a publication like, New York Times or even some trade publication, I can look at the publication, I can look at the masthead, and I can see, okay, Joe's a writer for this publication. Boom, I know, it's legitimacy, right? Well, if I'm working with an independent blogger who's working out of his house or her house or whatever, how do I know that, who do I know these people are? So you have to really look at their content. So that's what I do. That would be the first thing. Got to do your homework. Look at the content. Now, when I started doing this with HP, what we would do is I would get them, I would talk to them. I'd get them laptop computers to review, right? Now, traditionally only magazines and professional reviewers got these things. Now I started sending them out to like these people. Literally, one of them was a kid who was like under 18 working out of his basement, and I had to get his mother to sign the release form, so that he could receive the laptop and then review it. And by the way, the kid did a great job. He was one of the better bloggers that we worked with on that particular project, and I'll tell you why. What he did was he took the laptop and he didn't just play around with it in his house and try things out and everything else. He took it to class with him. He went into school and he took the laptop with him and he's plugging in, he's showing it, and he's showing his friends in the school, hey, check this out. HP got me this laptop on advance. Check this out. I get to check it out. And then he would blog about how the product did in these environments. And he would put it in, this classroom and then at homework, whatever it was. And he produced so many blog posts. It was like the equivalent to a 20-page term paper, So, and it was a sequence. It was a serial actually about the product. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And it wasn't like it was all glowing. He said, well, in these things, the laptop really performed well. And in other things, it didn't perform so well. But the key factor is that I didn't just send him the thing blind. I got him on a phone call before we sent it to him and with a product manager. And we walked through with the kid. Hey, look, this is the audience the laptop is developed for. No audience is the same, right? Not everybody goes out and buys a gaming laptop, right? You don't need a rocket ship to walk in the park. So, you're going to buy a different thing based upon your particular needs. That's why these companies produce so many versions of a laptop, right? And that's what we explained to the kid, and he got that. And then he published all this great content about it. I couldn't have asked for better. So then we just kept adding and adding more and more of these bloggers to our Rolodex, if you want to call it that. Maybe that word dates me a little bit, but and then we had this cadre of relationships with bloggers. Now that also worked to our advantage because if HP started getting some negative press, and that negative press was wrong, just factually wrong, I could go to those bloggers and say, hey, look, have you guys seen this stuff that this reporter's putting out? This stuff is it's just inaccurate. Now, we've talked to the reporter and we tried to get it corrected and everything else and whatever. If you guys feel free to chime in on this conversation yourselves. And a bunch of them did. And they go back, I saw this article about, that said such and such about HP. It's wrong. This is the way it really is, da da da, and it sort of automatically corrected, because PR people operate from a sense of fear, because it's like every announcement is just going to go wrong, how's this going to go wrong? Who's going to, oh my God, somebody said something negative. Now we have to go back. We have to go, it's like, well, not all negative things are actually that bad. I mean, it just makes it more real in the mind.
Tom, I think you just said that it makes it more real. And I feel this way is that sometimes when you say influencer marketing, it goes, oh, that's so fake. That just feels fake to me. But if it really is working, it has to be honest. It has to be real. It has to be authentic. I mean, that may be an overused word. And by the way, you go on YouTube now and look up, I bought this camera. I don't know where it's at. Oh, here it is. Bought this camera. I'm showing my camera on the screen for those of you so I bought this camera. I bought it to go to a conference. What's it called? DJI Osmo Pocket 3. I love it. So I went on YouTube and there was a number of people giving product reviews, and they're influencers. And I'm watching those videos, and some say, oh, Osmo, they paid me for this. So, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to give my true opinion. Others are saying I didn't get paid for this, but I love it. I use it. I think if it comes off as a commercial, it's not influencer marketing. If you gave a script to that guy and said, you read it this way and we'll play the music in the background, it's a commercial and you've lost a valuable opportunity. When they say, oh, this is one of the problems with it, it feels like, okay, I know this isn't a commercial. And I remember the one guy saying, I think my Apple phone does better in this situation than the DJI Osmo. And I thought, okay, good. I'm not as picky as that guy, so I don't even care. But the fact that he was willing to talk about a shortcoming made it more real. And I think this is what makes sense. I got to tell you, Tom, in our very politicized world, I don't like politics on my podcast. I don't know the right answers, and I don't think most of my guests do either. So I don't want to hear about it. But it also is upsetting to people, so I avoid that. But what I never want to avoid is um, real conversations about stuff, and that doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. That doesn't mean you point out those guys are losers or those guys are lying. But it still has to be there has to be a sense of reality to it, or you're not going to have an audience as a podcaster, a YouTuber, or a writer, or anything else. Anyway, let's wrap this bad boy up, Tom Augenthaler. So I'm talking to my friend Tom, and we're talking about stop selling. Not really. You got to still sell. Stop selling and start influencing. Tom Augenthaler, marketing game plan. So I think this is a nice influencer marketing. It's here to stay. We see it everywhere. I think the name of the game in my mind is you got to find the guy who has the audience that you want to connect with. And it's got to be the right collaboration. I think if you start to try and script everything and to make it into an infomercial, you've lost your way. And so is the influencer. I think if you pick somebody who is upsetting to your potential customers, you might have screwed up. But there's tons of people. So I'll just think of the podcasting, logistics podcasting. There's a ton of companies out there, and some might say we are not logistics influencers. That's fine. They have other goals. That's fine. But there's tons of us out there, and then you go over to YouTube. There's even more. So there's a universe of people who are creating content that you can potentially collaborate with, and I think that has a real place in the business. But enough about what I think. What do you think, Tom? Put a big old bow on this. Final thoughts on the topic.
Yeah. So you kind of hit a bunch of points there, which are really cogent to our conversation. The first being that it's not about advertising. There's plenty of advertising in the world, and unfortunately, consumer influencer marketing has become, in my mind, in my opinion, just that. So you've got an influencer on Instagram. Let's say she's got 1.3 million followers or something, and you pay her to say X, Y, and Z about your product, and she posts about it. She does a reel about it, and blah, 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 blah. And it all leads to some landing page or something that you set up. That's just advertising, right? And it's valuable to a degree. It is. But what I'm talking about is different because, as we were saying earlier, if you're going to make a purchase for your company, it's a B2B purchase. You're buying a product from another business, which is supposed to help your business do something better than it's already doing, right? Kind of streamline the process. And, that could be a procurement system, a supply chain system, whatever. I mean, pick something out of the hat. You're going to want to go and look around really carefully before you start reaching out to those companies to have deeper conversations. So the way to do this is if you're the company that's doing the marketing and the selling, you want to get in front of influencers like you and have your spokespeople have good, authentic conversations about the ups, the downs, where the industry's going, in your opinion, where it's not going, what could be done better, what's being done poorly. Just, be honest. And that genuineness will come through and provide you dividends that you can't even see or feel for a while necessarily. And that's called demand gen, right? So if you're going to build some demand by getting this content out there. The other thing is that I'd say you'd want to work with some, multiple influencers at once. So it's not like one and done. I get on Joe's podcast and then all this business is going to start rolling in. No, you've got to work with other influencers in the industry too. And get on their podcast, get them to help you write articles or whatever kind of content you think is going to be a good fit for your buying audience. Get that content out there, because it's what I refer to as building a mosaic. So you're creating a mosaic, a picture for your buyer to look at, right? And nobody is like, well, for logistics, I just go to Joe. Well, I mean, there are other people in the industry, right? So, I mean, you've got other info, and you probably know them all. So,
No, yeah, there's a lot, and everybody's got a little different take. So I think of the guys at Freight Waves. They've done fantastic. They've got a whole bunch of different podcasts, and people tend to listen to what they like. They go out. They like. They say, I like Dooner. Okay, listen to Dooner. They might listen to my podcast, or like Broomleave, or there's dozens of others. And yeah, it's just, I always say, it's just like your Spotify list. You don't listen to one artist. You might have a country song, a pop song, some rock, rap, whatever you're listening to. You don't have one artist. You have a whole bunch, and you like some better than others. But I think that's the nature.
Another piece of advice I give to companies looking to get into the influencer marketing space and start doing some of it for themselves is to ask your customers, who do they listen to? Where do they go for information? Because if you start going to those places directly, well, I can guarantee you some of your other customers are listening to the same thing, or your potential buyers are listening and watching, reading material there as well. So learning from your customers is a great thing. So it's one thing to think internally about, well, our customers and our buyers do this, that, and the other thing. Well, the best way to learn about what they're doing is to talk to them, right? The best CMOs in the world I know of go around and meet with the customers one-on-one and have conversations with them. Very often they'll fly around or travel around and just meet with the customers and really deeply understand, what are their pain points, what are their aspirations, what are they looking at, what are they fearing, what are they seeing as opportunities. Learning all of that, because knowing where your customers are going is where you want to be.
I love it. Tom, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any other links that you have to share. And I'll put some of our other interviews in, like the Dark Funnel interview. I love that whole concept, because I think it's what we're all dealing with today. And one more time, who do you work with? Who's the sweet spot for 551 Media?
Business to business SaaS companies, software as a service company. And that could mean just about anything. I mean, I've worked with pricing companies, supply chain, procurement. I've got a subscription company right now, a CX company, meaning customer experience. I've got one consulting company that I work with, which is kind of an anomaly, but because they work in some of these niches, I'm able to help them. I've worked with cybersecurity companies. Boy, that's a weird industry, man.
Super important these days. So anyway, Tom, thank you so much for taking the time. I always learn from talking to you. We talked the other day, and I've been thinking about some of the things you said to me today and the other day. You've got a unique perspective on this world.
Thank you. I always enjoy our conversations, Joe. I learn from you as well. And, that's part of what a relationship's supposed to be about, right?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Love to be in here. Thank you.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.